Welcome to Sleepy Historian, where history isn't rushed. It's whispered. Tonight, we gently drift through time to uncover the quiet brilliance behind the world's greatest inventions. Not just machines, but moments that changed how we live, how we dream, and how we understand the world around us. So find your calm, rest your thoughts, and let your curiosity settle in. This is History for Sleep, the Greatest Inventions. Chapter 1. A gentle spark, the origins of human invention, before language found its rhythm, before stories carved their way through time. There were sparks small and silent. Somewhere under a sky thick with stars, a hand struck stone against stone, and light bloomed where darkness had ruled. Fire was not discovered all at once. It was coaxed, like a secret being whispered from nature to humankind. The crackle of flame was more than heat. It was survival flickering into hope. In those earliest moments, humanity lived closely with the earth. Cold nights crept through animal skins and hunger gnawed with relentless teeth. But one spark at a time, humans learned. They watched lightning set trees ablaze and realized that fire could warm, cook, protect. It became a gathering place, a circle where faces glowed orange and shadows danced on cave walls. Alongside fire came stone. The earliest tools were simple, sharp-edged rocks shaped to cut or scrape. But even then, there was something more. These tools weren't just practical. They were expressions of thought, of cause and effect, of planning and reflection. Each chipped flake was a moment of understanding. Stone carried memory. It remembered the hand that held it, the food it helped prepare, the path it cleared, and then the wheel. Not at first as we know it, but perhaps a round log rolled under heavy loads, a curious eye noticing its ease. The wheel was not born in an instant, but through repeated patterns and patient play. Its rotation mirrored the cycles of nature, the sun, the moon, the seasons. It was both imitation and transformation, nature's form repurposed for human needs. The first sparks of invention were quiet. They did not announce themselves with celebration or song. They crept gently into life, one fire, one flint, one turning circle at a time. They were born not from genius, but from the simple, relentless rhythm of need. Hands that dream. The human hand is more than bone and skin. It is a storyteller, a sculptor, a dreamer. Long before we built cities or wrote names, our hands were building futures. Picture a hand cupped around a flame, shielding it from the wind, or shaping clay into a vessel to hold water, or tying plant fibers into rope. In these motions, small and slow, something extraordinary was happening. The hand was learning not just to grasp, but to create. From early hammers made of stone to carved bone needles, the hand extended thought into action. A need would arise to cut meat, to carry grain, to catch fish, and the hand would respond, not with muscle alone, but with curiosity. And over time, those hands began to shape more than tools. They shaped symbols, marks scratched into bone, or drawn on cave walls, circles, animals, stories. These were hands reaching beyond the present moment. Each mark was a step toward memory, toward culture, toward the invisible world of ideas. Tools became more refined. Blades were smoothed, handles fitted, spears balanced. But beyond their use, they became reflections of the mind behind them. They were thoughts made tangible. And like seeds, they grew. Even now, when we hold a pen, turn a page, or swipe a screen, our hands are echoing those first movements. Hands that once cracked stones together now craft symphonies, paint starscapes, build bridges of steel and light. They still dream, just in different forms. The journey from holding the world to shaping it was slow but steady. It did not begin With brilliance, but with presence, with hands that paid attention, and slowly learned to imagine. Moments of necessity. Necessity, they say, is the mother of invention. But necessity does not always shout. Sometimes it is a quiet hunger, a cold wind, a journey too far for tired feet. Early inventions answered these whispers. The lean-to hut, made of branches and leaves, wasn't a grand structure, but it sheltered. Sleep protected fire and turned chaos into a small corner of order. Clothing, stitched from animal skins, allowed movement through snow and thorn. Baskets wove together more than reeds. They held food, yes, but also the comfort of carrying. Each creation was a response, but it was also more than that. It was a choice to change the world rather than suffer it, and with every problem solved, something stirred in the soul. A sharpened spear meant more than a meal. It meant strategy, foresight, hope. A raft built to cross water spoke of daring, of reaching past what was familiar. A drum carved from hollow wood wasn't needed for food or fire, but it gave rhythm to life, to ceremony, to connection. These small leaps forward awakened a larger awareness that humans could shape their own paths. No longer just reacting to the world, they began to reshape it, bend it, build with it, dream into it, theirs. Beauty in this pattern. A challenge arrives, a need arises, and instead of fear, there is response. A child cries, and a lullaby is born. Darkness falls, and lamps are lit. Silence stretches too long, and a flute offers melody. Invention is not just about fixing problems. It is also about filling emptiness with warmth, with meaning, with wonder. From surviving to creating, there comes a moment, subtle but profound, when survival no longer consumes every breath, when there is space to look around and to wonder not what is missing, but what could be. This was the quiet revolution. The fire that once only cooked now warmed art into being. Shadows on cave walls became canvases. Spears once used only for the hunt were decorated, carved with care. The world was still hard, but now it was also beautiful. This shift from surviving to creating was the true dawn of invention, with time no longer tied entirely to gathering and guarding. The mind wandered, and where it wandered, creation followed. Music rose from strings and skins. Paint danced across stone. Stories passed from mouth to mouth, carrying lessons, laughter, love. Inventions grew more layered. A loom to weave cloth, a kiln to fire clay, a flute made of bone. These were not answers to crisis. They were answers to curiosity. To create is to reach beyond what is needed into what is imagined. It is to ask, what if? What next? What more? And this question, once asked, never stopped. It leapt across generations, from wheel to wagon, from boat to sail, from torch to lantern. Each new idea carried the echoes of those first sparks of hands that once dreamed beside a fire. Today, we live surrounded by invention's electric lights, glowing. Screens, cities stretching into the clouds. But beneath it all, the spirit of that first gentle spark still glows. It whispers not of genius, but of wonder. Not of glory, but of growth. It reminds us that invention does not begin with knowing. It begins with noticing, with caring, with imagining something more. And in that soft imagining, humanity took its first step, not just forward, but upward. Chapter 2. Capturing time. The camera. Long before the modern click of a shutter, long before photographs were scattered across screens and printed in albums, there was only light and shadow bending, bouncing, slipping through small spaces. The story of the camera begins not with machines, but with a hole. The ancient Chinese philosopher Mozi wrote of it first. He noticed that light passing through a pinhole, could cast the image of the outside world onto a wall upside down. But clear. Centuries later, in the quiet rooms of the Islamic Golden Age, thinkers like Alhazen expanded the idea. They didn't call it photography. They called it understanding. These early discoveries were more than science. They were magic in motion. A darkened room, a narrow opening, and suddenly the outside world was inside. Sunlight, trees, clouds. People all appearing softly on walls of shadow. These were the first camera obscuras. Not tools yet, not machines, but they whispered the future. Artists used them to trace landscapes. Astronomers used them to study eclipses. And slowly, minds turned toward one question. Could these ghostly images be saved? The answer would take centuries to arrive. When it did, it came not as thunder, but as silver and glass, slow, delicate, and full of wonder. The earliest photographs, in the early 1800s, weren't taken in moments. They were grown over hours under light. The Frenchman Joseph Nice Fournipsy captured one of the first, a quiet rooftop scene, touched by sunlight, etched into metal with chemicals and care. Each plate was a kind of treasure. Each process a careful dance of timing, light, and stillness. Early cameras were large, wooden, and mysterious. They required patience and often, still subjects who could wait, motionless, while time gently painted them. To look through one was to peer into a slow miracle. These first steps were not about speed. They were about holding on to something, a glimpse of now, made permanent, a flash of memory, and then things began to move faster. The camera, once a painter of light, became a catcher of moments, exposure. Times shrank. Plates gave way to film. And with each change, the camera edged closer to life, no longer just reflecting it, but racing to keep up with it. With George Eastman's Kodak camera in the late 1800s, photography leapt from labs and studios into the hands of the everyday person. You press the button, we do the rest, the slogan promised. And with that, a quiet revolution began, for the first time, people could capture their own memories, not just the wealthy or the patient, but anyone. Earth days, family dinners, train rides, summer picnics, all frozen, framed, and filed away. Life didn't have to be remembered through stories alone. Now there were images, visual echoes of laughter, tears, and time. The world, too, began to take notice. War photographers trudged through mud and smoke. Their cameras hung like tools of truth. Soldiers' faces, empty streets, flags both rising and falling. The flash became a witness, a second eye, cold and honest, that blinked in. The middle of chaos, weddings were captured in black and white. Children's first steps were caught mid-motion. Moments that would have slipped quietly into the past were now pinned like stars in a personal sky, and as photography moved into journalism, something shifted again. Images weren't just memories, they were messages. The Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, World War, civil rights. Cameras didn't just record these events. They shaped how the world understood them. A flash and a second later, history was caught. Fragile, maybe. But there, the camera had become more than a machine. It had become memory's partner, the eye that remembers in time. Photographs stopped being just records of what happened. They became ways of remembering and forgetting. A photo can hold a moment still. A smile, a tear, a goodbye at a train station. It doesn't move, doesn't age. It just remains. And because of that, it becomes a kind of mirror, not of the world as it is, but of the world as we hope to hold it. People gathered their pictures into albums. bound books of faces and seasons, grandparents young again, children barely days, old, whole lives folded into paper squares, tucked into drawers, stuck to refrigerators. Photographs don't only reflect people, they reflect the feelings we had when we took them, and sometimes they help us heal. After loss, after distance, after silence, a photo lets us look back gently, to say this was without needing, to say more. In hospitals, in homes, in memory boxes stored away, photos become soft places to land. They can also change what we remember. We recall what we've seen, not always what happened. A birthday photo might show smiles, but hide the argument from that morning. A vacation snapshot might frame only blue skies, not the long drive that came before. Memory, like photography, chooses its frame, and still we hold onto them. A picture of someone laughing reminds us that they laughed. A blurry photo of a friend reminds us that they were there. A photo of ourselves, younger, softer, unsure, reminds us how far we've come. Cameras became companions to our emotions. Their lenses didn't just see. They helped us feel. They helped us remember in color, in shape, in stillness. And sometimes they helped us move forward. Life in focus. The more cameras entered life, the more life began to change. When we know a moment might be photographed, we sit differently. We smile wider. We pose. In some ways, we perform for the lens, for the future. The camera doesn't just record life. It changes how we live it. In the 20th century, cameras shrank. They slipped into pockets, into purses, into our palms. Disposable film, then digital, then phones. What once took hours now took seconds. And what once cost money now became endless. Every face, every lunch, every sky, every street. Click, click, click. At first, this flood of photos seemed strange, overwhelming. But then, it became the rhythm of life. A way to say, I was here. This mattered. Look, social media turned the photo into something public, not just memory, but message. Not just reflection, but expression. The camera became a tool not just to capture what was, but to shape how we wanted to be seen. This new world of constant pictures raised new questions. What is real? What is posed? What is honest? But even as images multiplied, one truth remained. The camera still connected us. It let a grandmother in another country see her grandchild's first steps. It let a stranger witness a sunrise on the other side of the world. It let protests be seen. It let joy be shared. It let silence be noticed. The camera, through all its changes, has always done one thing. It has made time visible. From the soft glow of a pinhole image to the crisp frame of a phone screen, it has helped us see not just with our eyes, but with our hearts. And as we move forward, one frame at a time, the camera moves with us, not as a machine, but as a witness, a keeper of light, a friend to memory, a quiet reminder that even the smallest moments when held still can become timeless. Chapter 3. The Symphony of Silence. The phonograph. Before the phonograph, sound was a fleeting thing. A laugh, a lullaby, a whisper here, and then gone. Once a voice fell silent, it belonged to memory alone. But then came a machine that could do something new. It could listen, and it could remember. In 1877, Thomas Edison unveiled something that felt more like magic than invention. A small cylinder, a needle, a turn of the crank, and then, from the brass horn, came a voice. His own. Mary had a little lamb, it said. Words once spoken, now returned. Captured. Hell.it was the first time in human history that sound itself had been preserved. The early phonograph didn't look like much. A wooden bass, a spinning drum. Noisy, scratchy, strange. But it held something. Powerful, the ability to bring back a moment that had passed. The crackle of a child's voice. The tremble in a mother's lullaby. The ring of a bell long stilled. The phonograph made time feel softer. At first, people didn't quite know what to make of it. Was it a novelty? A toy? A tool? But slowly, as they leaned closer and listened, they understood. This wasn't just a device that captured sound. It was a door. A new way to hold on to something that had always slipped away. And so, from that first recording onward, silence began to change. It was no longer empty. Now it could be filled with music, with stories, with the echo of someone who was no longer in the room. Edison's phonograph gave the world its first glimpse of something extraordinary, a machine that could not just record, but remember, voices beyond the room before the phonograph, voices only lived in the moment, tied to breath, bound by presence. But now, a singer in one city could fill the air of a room across the world. A poet's words, once read aloud to a small crowd, could now speak to thousands. A leader's speech could echo long after the crowd had gone. The phonograph broke the boundaries of space and time. For the first time, sound traveled farther than feet could walk. No longer limited to theaters or town squares, voices became visitors in the quiet corners of everyday life. They came through a horn, warm and close. As if sitting across the table, opera singers brought their soaring arias into homes that had never seen a stage. Presidents and poets, captured on fragile discs, spoke of hope, struggle, peace. And for many, these recordings were the first time they had heard someone outside their world. It was more than entertainment. It was connection. People gathered around the phonograph the way they once gathered around fires. In parlors and drawing rooms, families sat still, listening, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. Because this wasn't just sound. It was presence. It was company, and for those who felt far from others by distance, by time, by loss, the phonograph became a quiet companion. A way to hear a familiar voice again. A way to not feel alone. It reminded us that every voice matters. That a song sung in a small room might one day fill 1,000 hearts. That a story told softly into a machine might one day be heard again. Long after the storyteller was gone, the echo of emotion as the phonograph spread, it did more than carry sound, it carried feeling. Music, once confined to concert halls or church pews, now lived in kitchens and bedrooms. It became something people could reach for. Whenever they needed it, a favorite song could be played again. And again. And again. And in that repetition, something new was born. Intimacy. Music became personal. Not just heard, but held. Not just played, but felt. For the first time, people built soundtracks to their lives. A child might fall asleep to the same lullaby each night, spun gently from a record. A couple might dance to the same song year after year, its melody unchanged even as they grew older. A lonely heart might find comfort in the voice of someone they had never met. The phonograph didn't just bring music home. It made it a part of home. Songs now carried memories. The moment when a record cracked mid-chorus. The scratch of a worn groove that had been played too many times. The smile of someone you loved, singing along off-key. These small things stayed. They became echoes not just of music, but of emotion, and through it all, the phonograph remained steady, turning, spinning, sharing Its sounds weren't perfect. They were fuzzy, rough, sometimes broken. But they were real, honest. They reminded us that beauty doesn't have to be flawless. That connection doesn't have to be loud. That sometimes the softest notes are the ones we remember most, a world in harmony and time. The phonograph grew smaller, smoother, and more widespread. And with it, the world began to hum with shared sound across countries and continents. People listened to the same voices. They heard the same songs, the same symphonies, the same rhythms. And though their languages and lives were different, something began to unite them, a melody, a beat, a voice. Music became a bridge. A jazz record played in New Orleans could be heard in Paris. A folk song recorded in the hills of Appalachia could reach homes in cities far away. The phonograph didn't erase distance, it simply softened it, and in this growing chorus, culture moved more freely. Ideas spread through melody. Traditions were shared through tune. People learned not just about each other, but from each other. It wasn't just music either. It was laughter, storytelling, sermons, speeches, all spun into grooves, packed into cases, and sent across the world. A library of sound passed from hand to hand. The phonograph had become more than a machine. It was a quiet teacher, a patient, traveler, a companion in joy and sorrow. It helped people listen not just to songs, but to each other, and in doing so, it gave the world a gift, a new kind of harmony. Not perfect, not always in tune, but true. In a time before the internet, before streaming, before even radio, the phonograph sang. And the world slowly began to sing back. It is easy now to overlook it, to see it as old, outdated. But listen closely, and you'll hear it still. In the warmth of vinyl, in the hiss of a needle, in the hush before the music begins, a reminder. That sound, once captured, never really fades. It waits patiently for someone to listen. Chapter 4. Threads of Time. The sewing machine. For centuries, a single needle passed patiently through cloth, guided by hand and lit by lantern light. Stitch by stitch, garments formed slow, steady, full of care. Every seam held time. Every hem carried hours. But then, one day, time changed its rhythm. A quiet hum replaced the rustle of thread. Clicks replaced silence. The sewing machine had arrived. It didn't start in a flash. The journey to mechanized sewing stretched across decades, full of starts and stumbles. In the late 1700s, early versions tried to mimic the human hand. But it was Elias Howe, in the mid-1800s, who would design a needle that worked with a looped thread paired with a shuttle, and that changed everything. Not long after, Isaac Singer made the machine more accessible, and suddenly, what took hours could now take minutes. For those who stitched for survival, for tailors, for seamstresses, for mothers mending clothes, this wasn't just a new tool. It was a new pace of life, one that ticked faster, smoother, and more efficiently, the soft pull of fabric through the machine, the repetitive thump of the needle piercing cotton or wool, the foot pedal rising and falling. It was no longer just sewing, it was music, played in thread and speed. Homes began to hum. Factories began to buzz. And time, once stitched slowly, by hand, now moved in quiet bursts of innovation. The sewing machine made more than clothes, it made time feel different. Lighter, swifter, more possible, and still the work held meaning. Even though the hands were now joined by machines, the care remained. The needle still moved with purpose. The cloth still carried stories. Only now it carried them faster. A needle through history, the sewing machine didn't just shape fabric, it shaped futures. In a world where opportunity often depended on strength or status, the sewing machine offered something different, a quiet kind of power, accessible through skill, patience, and rhythm, for women especially. It became a tool of independence. In living rooms and small workshops, sewing machines turned labor into income. A woman could sew clothes for neighbors, mend uniforms, or piece together quilts to sell. In doing so, she stitched not just fabric, but stability for herself, for her children, for her home. In immigrant communities, sewing was often the first work available. A needle and a machine could speak any language. In cities, sweatshops, rows crowded, hot, difficult places. But even there, the machine offered a thread of hope, a paycheck, a foothold, a path forward. Entire industries grew around this one invention. Uniforms for armies, dresses for store shelves, workwear for railroads and mines. Factories filled with rows of machines, each one turning bolts of cloth into garments worn across nations. And through it all, the sewing machine never shouted. It simply moved stitch by stitch, pulling history forward. The sewing machine taught that power doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it hums. Sometimes it glides beneath fingers. Sometimes it's found in the steady beat of a needle, creating something useful from something soft, clothing the imagination as stitching became faster. Something unexpected happened. People didn't just make more clothes, they made different clothes. Faster sewing opened the door to creativity. And through that door came style. Fashion, once reserved for the wealthy, became more available. People could try new shapes, new fabrics, new colors. Hemlines changed. Sleeves puffed. Patterns bloomed. And behind it, all was the sewing machine quietly turning ideas into outfits. A young woman could sketch a dress, cut the fabric, and stitch it herself. A tailor could offer new fits to customers who wanted to stand out. A designer could test and tweak with speed never known before. In homes across the world, patterns were spread across kitchen tables. Chalk lines traced curves. Pins held dreams in place. A dress wasn't just something to wear, it was a reflection of the person inside it. School children wore uniforms stitched in rows. Brides wore gowns sewn with trembling hands. Babies were wrapped in tiny outfits, passed down and adjusted year after year. Each piece held meaning. Each thread carried care. The sewing machine made style more accessible. It also made identity more visible. People expressed who they were not just with words, but with stitches. Through collars and cuffs, scarves and skirts, coats and capes, they told the world, "This is me," and behind every outfit was a hand, a foot pressing a pedal, a person who had imagined a different way to be seen and made it real, one line of thread at a time, fabric, family, future in the quiet corners of homes. Sewing machines sat like old friends, often tucked near windows, surrounded by scraps and spools. They waited, not for factories, not for fashion houses, but for families. A mother stitched her child's name into a coat. A grandfather mended his sleeve with practiced hands. A teenager, learning from a parent, tried her first seam on a simple apron. In these small acts, the sewing machine became something more than a machine. It became part of the family. Quilts were pieced together, not just from fabric, but from memory. Old shirts, worn dresses, curtains once hanging in sunlit rooms. Each square held a story. Each line of stitching, a moment preserved. Quilting. Bees, once held in community halls and church basements, turned sewing into storytelling. And every finished quilt became a gift of warmth, of history, of love. The sewing machine also made the future feel close. A young couple stitched clothes for their unborn child. A student altered thrifted finds into something new. People repaired instead of replacing. And in doing so, they built not just clothes but resilience even today. With fast fashion and digital patterns, the hum of a sewing machine still carries something special. It reminds us of patience, of care, of the value in making something. With our own hands, the sewing machine taught us that the future isn't only shaped by invention, but by attention. By sitting still, choosing fabric, following a line. By knowing that even the smallest thread, when pulled with purpose, can hold generations together, and so, as the machine hums softly into the night, we are reminded every stitch is a step through time, and time, like thread, connects us all. Chapter 5. Air in Motion, the electric fan. Before wires and motors filled our homes, cooling came from the hand. A folded fan, a woven palm, a breeze chased by human rhythm. It was slow, personal, and fleeting. The air moved only as long as arms could wave. Comfort was effort, and relief was short-lived. But then, the breeze changed. In the late 1800s, as electricity began humming through walls and wires, inventors turned their eyes to air. What if wind could be summoned not by muscle, but by motion powered by current? What if comfort could hum quietly in the background, steady and smooth? By the 1880s, the first electric fans arrived. Heavy, small, made mostly of metal. They spun with exposed blades, guided by simple motors, and gave rooms something they had never felt before, a breeze that never tired. What was once a luxury of palaces cooled by servants waving large fans now became possible in shops, offices, homes. One switch, a low hum, and suddenly, still air danced again. The fan didn't roar. It didn't boast. But its presence reshaped everyday life. No longer did people need to sit by windows waiting for the weather's mercy. No longer did they drape damp cloths on their necks just to bear the heat. Now, relief came from a box on the desk, a fan on the floor, a gentle hum spinning circles into the air. IT wasn't just invention. It was transformation. A revolution in breeze, quiet, cool, and electric, the gentle savior when summer pressed down like a heavy blanket, when rooms turned to ovens and sleep became sweat. The fan became more than a convenience. It became a gentle savior. In classrooms, where children struggled to focus, a small fan could stir the air, just enough to keep minds alert and pencils moving. In crowded factories, where machines hissed and workers toiled in thick heat, fans brought breath, a moment of comfort between labor and fatigue. In homes, mothers leaned over stoves while ceiling fans whirled above, keeping kitchens bearable. Babies slept beneath the rhythmic spinning of box fans. Elderly relatives rested in rocking chairs, the soft breeze turning sticky silence into a kind of calm. Hospitals placed fans near beds. Trains mounted them in corners. Restaurants opened their doors with fans spinning in the entryway, offering customers a cool welcome from the sun outside. The fan didn't promise full relief. It couldn't chase away every degree of heat. But it changed the air enough to give hope, enough to soothe, enough to help people get through one more hour, one more task, one more night. And in those quiet moments, when sweat began to dry, when still air began to shift, people breathed differently. Not because the world had changed, but because the fan had. IT didn't shout its impact. It whispered it with every turn of its blades, every sigh of air, every room it helped feel just a little more livable. Turning blades, turning times. The electric fan did more than cool. It altered how people lived and how well with heat. Managed, sleep deepened. Workers stayed focused longer. Productivity rose in shops and studios, in offices and kitchens. The quiet hum of a fan became part of the rhythm of work and rest alike. Children who once tossed and turned in warm bedrooms now fell asleep to the low drone of moving air. The white noise of the fan covered distant cars, barking dogs, ticking clocks. It became a lullaby not sung, but spun in offices. Fans placed near desks reduced the sluggishness of summer days. In libraries, quiet blades turned while readers lost themselves in books. In labs, where cool conditions were sometimes necessary, fans joined the tools that made discovery possible. Even leisure changed. People lingered longer indoors. Gathered around fans, they played board games, shared stories, or just sat in silence. Not because they had to, but because they could. It was a small thing, really. A circle of metal. A few blades. A switch. But it turned more than air. It turned routines. It turned expectations. It turned possibilities, and as fans grew safer, smaller and more stylish, they found their way into nearly every space. They hung from ceilings, stood tall on poles, sat gently on desks. Their shapes evolved, but their purpose stayed the same: to make life more livable with every turn. The fan helped people do more than just endure heat, it helped them move through life more clearly, more comfortably, and more fully. The power of cool invention isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives with a hum, soft, steady, unnoticed at first. But it changes everything. The electric fan did not stop wars or send rockets into space. It didn't dazzle like the light bulb or soar like the airplane. But it transformed homes, workspaces, and lives in ways that were quiet and constant. It changed how we dressed. Light fabrics in summer, short sleeves, more freedom to move because the air around us helped instead of hindered. It changed architecture too. Buildings began to breathe differently, designed to welcome airflow, to pair with the spin of a fan instead of fighting against the sun, and it changed how we felt physically, emotionally. Because comfort is not a luxury. It's a foundation. When we're too hot, we struggle to think, to move, to be present. But when we're cool, even slightly, we open. We think more clearly. We feel less anxious. We engage more freely. The fan made this possible. And it did so without asking for attention. Today, we often overlook it. We walk past it without thought. We press its buttons like an afterthought. But for many in apartments with no air conditioning, in classrooms without central cooling, in workshops where heat clings to every corner, the fan is everything. It's the difference between exhaustion and relief, between unrest and sleep, between surviving and feeling human. Its power is not in its noise, nor its size. Its power is in its simplicity. A quiet, spinning promise that comfort is possible. That, even in the thickest heat, there is always a breeze waiting ready to turn the air and the moment into something better. Chapter 6, The Invisible Thread, the Radio. The world has always been full of sound, rustling trees, distant thunder, the heartbeat beneath a quiet chest. But once, those sounds stayed where they began. Voices ended where the breath stopped. Music vanished once the strings were still. And then the air itself began to carry something more. In the late 19th century, invisible threads started weaving through the sky. These were not ropes or wires, but waves, radio waves. A gentle ripple of energy, moving quietly through space. At first, they were faint, fragile, misunderstood. But slowly, the idea took hold. Sound could travel without touch. In 1895, Guglielmo Marconi sent the first wireless signals. Just dots and dashes, Morse code whispering across the sea. But the potential was there, humming beneath the static. What if music could move through the air? What if a voice could cross a continent? Soon, sound joined the signal. Early experiments transmitted music into the night. A violin, a piano, a reading of poetry, all carried without wires, without tapes. Just waves moving silently through. The air, until they met a waiting ear, radios were not common yet. The receivers were large, clunky, full of wires and tubes. But to those who heard the first transmissions, it felt like magic, a voice, speaking from somewhere unseen, arriving as if by wind, and so the air came alive. No longer empty, no longer silent. It became a river of stories, of songs, of news. The sky held conversations. The night carried music. And the world, once bound by distance, began to lean in to listen. A voice in the night. There is something intimate about a voice in the dark. Something personal, even when shared. As radios entered homes, they found their place not in the corner of a room, but at the center of life. In the 1920s and 30s, radios became part of the furniture. Wood-paneled, glowing softly, they stood like quiet companions. Families gathered in the evenings, chairs pulled close, dinner plates set aside, lights dimmed and listened. There were no images, no flashing screens, just sound, just a voice, sometimes. It was laughter, a comedy program, full of jokes and music. Sometimes it was drama, a mystery unfolding through footsteps and gasps, doors creaking and hearts pounding. Other times, it was the news, slow, steady, serious. A war declared, a treaty signed, a rocket launched. Each word became a thread. In the tapestry of the times, children sat cross-legged on floors, eyes wide, listening to cowboys, detectives, and astronauts. Parents closed their eyes, hearing music from faraway places. For many, the radio was the first time they felt connected to the world beyond their walls, and in the quiet of night, when the rest of the house was still, a single voice could feel like company, like a friend whispering through the static. A gentle reminder that you are not alone. The radio became more than a machine. It became ritual, a shared moment, a breath taken together, across rooms, across streets, across the world. Unity through sound. With every broadcast, the radio tied people together. From big cities to small villages, from mountaintops to ships at sea, it spun a web of shared experience. During moments of crisis, it was a lifeline. In wartime, it carried voices of leaders, updates from the front lines, and messages of comfort. Families sat in silence, holding hands, waiting for good news, or bracing for the hard truth. In those moments, the radio felt sacred, a thread between fear and hope, but it wasn't only for sorrow. It carried joy too. Love songs on Sunday afternoons, jazz on a Saturday night, church choirs singing softly through static-filled speakers, celebrations of holidays, sports victories, and scientific achievements, all shared at once by millions who would never meet, yet felt the same pulse at the same time. The radio gave a voice to movements. It carried protest songs, speeches, and calls for change. It opened minds. It made distant places feel close. Cultures once isolated began to blend. Through music and language shared freely, there was unity in the air. Not always perfect, not always peaceful, but present. A child in Argentina, a teenager in France, a couple in Japan, all could hum the same melody, hear the same speech, laugh at the same joke. For the first time, sound became a bridge not only across miles, but across hearts. In the quiet, the radio connected us. Gently, steadily, sound by sound, tuning into a new world. Before the radio, news traveled slowly. Letters took days. Newspapers arrived with ink already drying. Conversations stayed within rooms. But the radio changed time. It made now feel like now. For everyone, with the turn of a dial, people entered new worlds. A symphony from Vienna. A weather report from the coast. A storytelling hour from the American South. They could tune into another country's sunrise, another culture's lullaby, another city's moment of silence. It wasn't just information, it was imagination. Listeners traveled without leaving home. Their world expanded, one station at a time. For immigrants, the radio was a lifeline to home. Familiar voices, native songs, news from distant lands. It softened the ache of separation. For farmers, it was a forecast. For sailors, a beacon. For dreamers, a doorway, and slowly the radio shaped how people saw the world. Not as a map of borders, but as a collection of voices speaking, singing, sharing. The air became a place. A space of connection, of curiosity, of belonging. Even now, as screens and satellites fill our lives, the radio remains. In cars, in kitchens, in late-night broadcasts heard under stars. It reminds us that listening is still an act of presence. That sound, when shared, becomes memory. The world we know today, fast, connected, filled with distant voices made close, began. With one wave, one signal, one voice in the air, and that voice is still there. Quiet, constant, waiting to be heard. Chapter 7. Light in a box, the television. Long before color danced across a glass screen, long before remote controls and binge were the shows, there was an idea, a hope that pictures could move, that stories could not only be told, but seen. Not just by one person in a theater, but by millions, in their own homes. At the start, it felt like magic. A flicker, a frame, a figure moving behind glass. Shadows and light, stitched together into something more, emotion. The earliest televisions were boxy, grainy, and full of static, but to those who first saw them, they were windows. Openings to other lives, other places, other feelings. Inventors around the world, from Scotland to the United States, worked toward the dream of broadcasting moving images. In the 1920s and 30 seconds, small successes led to bigger ones. The mechanical. Spinning discs gave way to electronic signals. Black and white pictures began to flicker to life, and then it happened. In living rooms once ruled by radios, a new presence arrived. Light, movement, story, the television. It wasn't just invention. It was transformation. People could now see what they had only imagined. A cowboy riding across the plains. A dancer twirling in a distant studio. A face smiling, crying, speaking not in still photographs, but alive. Moving, full of life. It wasn't just entertainment. It was connection. It was curiosity. It was a mirror, sometimes honest, sometimes softened, but always glowing, always drawing us in. Television didn't just bring pictures to life. It brought hearts to them. It gave emotion a form, a place, a pulse right there in the corner of the room, glowing softly like a lighthouse of story. The family gathering flame once, families gathered around firelight. It was where stories were told, food was shared, silence was respected. Then came the radio voices crackling from speakers, gathering listeners close. And then a new flame arrived. A colder glow, perhaps, but just as warm in its own way. The television screen. Evenings changed. Chairs shifted to face the screen. Meals were timed to finish before the favorite program. The room dimmed not from firelight, but from soft electric glow. And together, families watched. It was not just the shows, it was the ritual. The waiting. The opening credits, the theme song, the shared glances during tense scenes, the laughter that filled a room when the characters on screen said something funny, the tears that welled up when stories struck close to home. Parents and children sat side by side, watching the world unfold in 30-minute chapters. Saturday mornings became cartoons. Sunday nights became specials. The week had rhythm, and television was part of the beat. It also became comfort. For those who lived alone, the screen felt like company. For the tired and the busy, it offered a gentle end to the day. For the curious and the restless, it opened a new world without ever leaving. The couch, the fireplace once told stories in flame. The television told them in light. But the effect was the same warmth, closeness, and shared experience. In that glow, people didn't just see stories. They made memories of their own. Witness to the world. Television didn't only bring fiction into homes. It brought truth raw, immediate, unforgettable. It became a witness, recording the world as it changed, and letting everyone watch together. When the first images from the moon were broadcast in 1969, families stayed up late, eyes wide, watching grainy black and white figures hop and speak from a world beyond. A flag planted, a footprint left, a sentence spoken, one small step. And yet, millions felt it together, one giant leap, witnessed not from afar, but from the living room. Television carried the weight of history. It showed the faces of leaders, the marches for justice, the heartbreak of war. It didn't soften the news. It delivered it whole live, real and often difficult. But because of that, it created awareness, understanding, urgency. For the first time, disasters didn't just appear in headlines. They unfolded before our eyes. Hurricanes, bombings, elections, celebrations. Every image shaped perception. Every frame became a marker in memory, but it also captured the beauty of everyday life. Festivals from around the globe, animals in the wild, voices singing on faraway stages. It turned curiosity into education. It turned distance into closeness. Television became the world's diary, open, vulnerable, continuous. It showed us how connected we truly were. That a joy in one place could echo in another. That a tragedy could be shared, mourned, and remembered together, and in doing so, it made the world feel both bigger and more intimate. Culture. Broadcast television didn't just reflect culture. It helped shape it, from comedies that defined an era to dramas that questioned social norms, from news anchors who became trusted voices to game shows that made us laugh. Television became a thread in the fabric of daily life. Its stories found their way into our speech, our references, our dreams. Catchphrases entered classrooms. Characters became friends. Theme songs were hummed without thought. It wasn't just watching, it was belonging. Belonging to a moment, a movement, a memory. Television didn't just show the world, it built a shared one. Across towns, states, countries, people watched the same programs. And because of that, they shared a common story, a common language. Children from different backgrounds laughed at the same jokes. Families in different time zones cried at the same endings. Teenagers around the world saw their hopes, fears, and questions reflected back at them through the screen. Television became a canvas, one that carried both reflection and aspiration. It offered escape and insight. It made people feel seen, heard, connected, and behind every broadcast was more than wires and waves. There were writers, camera operators, actors, producers, people who believed in the power of story. People who worked so that others might feel something together. Today, screens have changed. They're smaller, sharper, portable. We stream. We pause, we rewind. But at its core, the heart of television remains a light in a box, a world unfolding frame by frame, a voice saying, sit with me, watch with me, feel this too, and as long as stories are told, that light soft, steady, and full of possibility will never go out. Chapter 8. The Cold Revolution. The refrigerator, before humming boxes lined kitchen walls, before freezer drawers and ice cube trays, keeping food cold meant work. It meant hauling blocks of ice. It meant root cellars, cool basements, and hurried meals before spoilage could set in. Freshness was fragile. Time, for food, was short. In the early 1800s, ice was shipped across lakes, stored beneath sawdust, and delivered to city homes by wagon. The icebox, a wooden chest lined with tin, was a marvel in its time. But even with effort and care, its chill was fleeting. Food still spoiled. Milk soured. Meat turned. And with every warm breeze, freshness felt like a race against nature. Then the quiet revolution began. By the early 20th century, electricity entered the kitchen. Engineers experimented with compression, coils, and cold. And slowly, refrigerators emerged. Loud at first, bulky and odd-looking, but full of promise. They didn't just store food. They changed what was possible. The earliest electric models were expensive, rare. But over the years, as technology improved and prices dropped, they began to hum in homes across the world. Their shape became familiar. Their doors swung open with a soft pull. Their light flicked on like a welcome. And no longer did people need to rely on daily trips to the market. Leftovers stayed safe. Milk lasted more than a day. Vegetables kept their crispness. The refrigerator did not shout its arrival. It whispered with cool air, steady rhythm, and a promise. Time would no longer win so easily. Freshness reimagined. The refrigerator changed the meaning of fresh. Once, freshness was brief, a morning pick, a same-day use. Now, it had a longer life, protected behind glass and metal, gently cooled by steady breath. For the first time, families could buy in bulk. A head of lettuce could last beyond dinner. A carton of eggs could sit safely for a week. Meat no longer had to be salted, dried, or consumed in haste. It could wait. Leftovers, once a risk, became routine. Last night's stew, safely cooled, became today's lunch. That birthday cake, just a slice or two left, stayed soft and sweet into the weekend. Cheese didn't mold so quickly. Butter stayed firm. Even delicate fruits, berries, peaches, grapes lingered in their beauty. Nutrition improved. Children drank milk that stayed cold, clean, safe. Parents stored baby food, juices, medicine. The fear of spoilage gave way to a sense of trust. The fridge brought rhythm to the home, a place for food to pause, to wait, to be ready. Shopping changed. Planning changed. Meals became more flexible, more creative. Options opened up. IT wasn't just about keeping things cold. It was about keeping life a little easier, a little safer, a little more spacious. Freshness was no longer a fleeting luxury. It became part of the routine, quiet, dependable, and always just behind the door, cooling the world's diet. The cold did more than protect food. It moved it across borders, oceans, and cultures. With refrigeration, distance no longer spoiled delicacies. The world's pantry expanded. Fish caught in the early morning off the coast of Norway could reach a table in Tokyo. Cheese aged in the hills of France could sit on a shelf in New York. Mangoes ripened under Indian sun could be chilled and shipped to places where snow fell outside. The refrigerator helped build a new kind of diet, one not limited by season or location. In summer, apples from the fall. In winter, greens from the sun. Global ingredients became part of local meals. And with each dish, curiosity grew. Sushi rolled in Midwest kitchens. Pasta sauces simmered with imported tomatoes. Stir fries, once cooked oceans away, sizzled on suburban stoves. Frozen dumplings, chilled yogurts, exotic spices packed in cold crates. Restaurants followed. Menus expanded. Grocery stores became gateways to the globe, the cold chain a network of trucks, ships. Markets, homes allowed food to move farther, last longer, and be shared more widely. And at the heart of that chain sat a simple appliance, humming quietly in countless kitchens. Refrigeration made the world taste closer. It didn't just cool food. It connected lives. And with every meal made from ingredients that once seemed distant, culture spread not through headlines, but through flavor. The taste of modern life opened the fridge door on a hot summer day. Feel the cool air brush your face. Reach for a glass of chilled water. That small act, simple, refreshing, is a luxury we barely notice, but once it was rare. Ice cream kept its shape. Popsicles didn't melt in minutes. Leftover pizza stayed just right for a midnight snack. Mornings started with cold juice. Nights ended with frozen treats. The fridge didn't just protect, it delighted. Children peered into its shelves like a treasure chest. Parents stocked it with care. A jug of milk, a bowl of fruit, a plate of something waiting for tomorrow. It wasn't just food. It was rhythm. It was comfort. It was possibility. The refrigerator reshaped the modern home. Its gentle hum became part of the background. Its magnet-covered door held schedules, drawings, reminders, recipes. It wasn't just a machine. It was a member of the family. It helped prevent waste. It gave flexibility to busy days. It allowed meals to stretch. It let people eat well, eat safely, eat when ready, and perhaps most quietly, most powerfully, it brought peace. Peace of mind. Peace in planning. A soft assurance that some things would last just a little longer, that tomorrow's meal would still be good, that today's effort would not be lost. That time could pause, just a little, behind a sealed door and a glowing light. Chapter 9. Speed of heat. The microwave oven. It didn't begin in a kitchen. It didn't start with a recipe or a chef. Instead, it started with a spark, not of inspiration, but of energy, moving through the air in waves invisible to the eye. In the 1940s, a man named Percy Spencer stood near a magnetron, a device used in radar technology. It was wartime, and radar was key to navigation and detection. The lab was filled with hums, wires, and electrical whirs. But what happened next was unexpected and oddly sweet. A chocolate bar in Spencer's pocket began to melt. Not from sunlight, not from touch, but from something else entirely. Curious. He placed popcorn kernels near the machine. They popped. He placed an egg. It exploded. The realization followed. This energy, these microwaves, could heat from within. This was not a pan or a flame. This was not heat rising from a stove. It was heat moving through the air directly into food. Fast. Efficient. Strange. By the late 1940s, the first microwave ovens were created. They were large, heavy, and expensive, used in restaurants and institutions. But the seed had been planted, and like all great inventions, it would shrink, soften, and settle into homes. Quietly, gradually, until one day, it would stand on countertops like it had always belonged, from a melted candy bar to a machine that would change how we cook. The microwave began not with a plan, but with a spark, minutes to meals in the decades that followed, the microwave. Oven found its place in everyday life. It was not just a new appliance. It was a new kind of timekeeper. As the world moved faster, so did families. Workdays stretched longer. Schedules tangled. Time, once spent stirring sauces and waiting for water to boil, became precious. Enter the microwave. A machine that didn't just cook, it saved time. Frozen dinners became weekday staples. Leftovers found second lives. Reheating soup took seconds. Defrosting meat no longer meant overnight waits, and slowly the kitchen changed. It became more flexible, less formal. A space where meals didn't need to simmer for hours. A space where food could be warm in a minute. Families gathered not just for Sunday roasts, but for microwave popcorn on movie nights. Breakfast sandwiches spun on rotating trays while shoes were tied and backpacks packed. Lunchtime leftovers warmed with the press of a button. The microwave gave back time, small minutes that added up to more sleep, more rest, more quiet. It didn't replace the stove. It didn't end the oven. But it offered a gentle hand to those who needed a shortcut, a soft solution, a warm meal when the day was long. In its hum, people heard convenience. In its light, they saw freedom. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't fussy. It was simply fast, and sometimes fast is what we need. Science of simplicity inside the microwave. Something remarkable was happening. But you wouldn't see it. No flame danced. No metal glowed. Just a soft light and a quiet whir. Microwaves, tiny waves of electromagnetic energy, bounced within the box. They passed through food, exciting water molecules, making them vibrate, heat, cook. It was heat not from the outside in, but from the inside out. There were no knobs to fine-tune a flame. No waiting for a preheat chime. Just numbers pressed. Time set. A door closed. What once felt like science fiction heating with invisible energy had become as normal as brushing teeth, and still, it felt like magic. Cold food, warm in moments. A drink, steaming after just a minute. Butter softened too. Spread, chocolate melted smooth. From leftovers to frozen meals, the microwave became a quiet performer in the everyday stage of life. Its power wasn't just speed. It was ease, simplicity, a new kind of accessibility. Elderly hands could manage it. Busy parents could rely on it. Teenagers could learn independence through it. It didn't ask for skill. It only asked for trust that pressing start would be enough, and behind the simplicity lived science. A calm, invisible dance of particles. A partnership. Between energy and nourishment, the microwave wasn't loud. It didn't sizzle or flare, but it worked. Quietly, reliably. Day after day, the modern kitchen's heartbeat, the microwave changed more than meals. It changed rhythm where once kitchens buzzed with boiling pots and chopping boards at every hour. Now there were pauses. Gaps filled by a soft hum. Waiting moments, shorter and calmer, a cup reheated while someone tied their apron. A bowl warmed while a table was cleared. A dish defrosted while a story was told. The microwave didn't demand attention. It allowed life to flow around it. It became a background beat, steady, quiet, essential, and slowly it reshaped habits. Snacking became easier. Cooking became optional. Leftovers became opportunities. Patience, once essential in the kitchen, gave way to convenience. It also changed how people saw food. Not everything needed to be made from scratch. Not every dinner needed to simmer. Meals could be simple. They could be spontaneous. They could begin with a beep. It wasn't about removing effort. but giving people choices. In college dorms, the microwave was a lifeline. In office break rooms, a moment of comfort. In apartments, a solution. In family homes, a shortcut on busy nights. The microwave was never the centerpiece. But it became the heartbeat, steady and familiar. Its buttons wore thin. Its handles shined from years of touch. Its glass tray spun quietly through birthdays, rainy mornings, late-night snacks, and early cups of tea. In its quiet way, it joined the story of modern life. Not with a bang, but with a beep, and in that small sound, something important was always ready. Warmth. Chapter 10. The dance of iron and fabric. The electric iron. Before the quiet hiss of steam and the glow of an indicator light, there were coals. Glowing embers tucked inside heavy irons made of cast metal. These were tools of warmth and weight, wielded with effort and care. And in their path, wrinkles disappeared not by chance, but by strength and heat. Centuries ago, the act of pressing cloth was not for the hurried or the humble. It was a ritual of the elite, a sign of status. Neatly flattened linen, silks. Without a fold, these were the marks of nobility, of wealth, of refinement. And the people who performed the pressing, often servants trained in the precise language of heat and cloth. But as centuries turned, as industry softened the divide between classes, the iron began to change hands. No longer just for palaces or drawing rooms, it entered the lives of the everyday. The need for smooth clothes, once an echo of elegance, became a gesture of self-respect. Wrinkle-free meant ready. It meant presentable. It meant prepared. The electric iron arrived quietly in the late 1800s. No coal, no stove. Just a cord, a plate, a promise. It took time to perfect, to balance the heat, to design the tip, to make it safe, affordable, effective. But slowly, the iron became part of home. Not an event, but a habit. Ironing was no longer about royalty. It became a kind of care for clothing. Yes, but also for oneself. It was a task of preparation, of smoothing the day before it began, and in that small act, something quietly powerful emerged, the ability to face the world with purpose. One crease at a time, ironing the past. The story of the iron is shaped by heat and ingenuity, a long journey from stone to steam. In the beginning, they were flat rocks warmed by fire, used to press animal skins and early cloth. Then came bronze plates, then heavier irons made of cast iron. These needed to be heated directly, placed on open flames, or filled with glowing coal. They were slow, soot-streaked, and heavy to hold. Each press was a workout. Each glide, deliberate. By the 19th century, irons began to evolve. Some were fueled by gas, others by spirits. The idea remained the same: weight and warmth. The execution slowly improved, and then electricity changed everything. In 1882, a man named Henry W. Seeley patented the first electric iron. It had no steam, no dials, just a metal body that grew hot when plugged in. But it was the beginning. A new kind of heat, clean and consistent. As the 20th century progressed, thermostats were added. Tips grew more pointed. Plates grew smoother, lighter, faster. Steam was introduced, a fine mist that softened fibers and made each pass more effective. Irons with reservoirs, with settings, with sleek designs, and so the iron became a tool not just of necessity, but of elegance. An object that married form and function. And no longer did people fear scorching or struggle to judge the temperature. The iron became intuitive, almost conversational. It told you, in its hums and clicks, when it was ready. When to begin. The past had been forged with heavy hands and open flame. The present now moved with steam and subtle grace, confidence in. A fold, there is something quietly powerful about a crisp shirt, a collar that stands just right, a seam that falls in place, a hem that doesn't curl. These details, small and often unnoticed, whisper something about the person wearing them. Ironing is not loud. It's not showy, but it carries meaning. To iron. A shirt is to prepare for school, for work, for ceremony. It is to smooth not just cloth, but nerves, to press away distraction, to find clarity in lines and folds. A crease down a pant leg signals care. A blouse without a wrinkle suggests readiness. Even uniforms, from soldiers to students, carry the silent pride of precision, and at home, ironing can become a moment of calm, a kind of meditation. The steady back and forth, the sound of steam, the slight weight in the hand. It is a task where progress is visible, where order is restored with every pass. Parents iron for their children, not just to ready their clothes, but to show love. Young adults iron for interviews, learning how self-presentation becomes part of voice. Even in grief or celebration, we press clothes as if saying, "This matters." Fabrics, when smooth, tell stories. They hold the shape we give them. And in return, they help us hold our shape too. Confidence sometimes begins with the little things. A neat fold, a sharp line, a garment made whole again. Steam, style, story. The iron's heat is practical, but its impact is deeply personal. With every press, we express something: a love for detail, a sense of occasion, a ritual of readiness. In every household, the iron becomes part of rhythm, a Sunday habit, a morning routine, a quiet hour spent preparing for what's next. It becomes part of style. People learn how different fabrics respond: the glide of silk, the weight of wool, the stretch of cotton. They learn preferences. Some want sharp creases, others soft curves. Some seek perfect polish, others just enough to feel clean, fresh, intentional. And in this space between heat and cloth, stories are passed down. A grandparent teaching how to iron a shirt collar just right. A parent showing a child how to fold along a pleat. A traveler smoothing their only jacket before a train ride. A bride steaming her veil the morning of her wedding. The iron becomes a witness to life's quiet in-betweens, the moments before the big moments. And though modern life has grown fast, though many garments now claim to be wrinkle-free, the iron remains steady, humming, reliable. It reminds us that some things are still worth smoothing. That effort, though small, leaves an impression. That care, though quiet, speaks loudest. The iron doesn't just change fabric. It lifts it, shapes it, honors it, and in doing so, it helps us do the same for ourselves. The laundry revolution, the washing machine. There was a time when clean clothes meant cold hands and bent backs. Along riverbanks and under open skies, generations of women knelt by the water, scrubbing fabric against stones, rinsing with care, wringing by hand. It was a rhythm passed down like a song not chosen, but inherited. In villages and cities, in winter and in sun, laundry was work. Heavy, wet, relentless. It filled whole days, leaving arms sore, fingers raw, and time swallowed by piles of soiled garments. And yet, it was done with devotion, because clean meant dignity. It meant health. It meant care. As the 18th century turned into the 19th, new ideas took shape: wooden drums turned by hand, barrels with cranks and levers. They helped a little, but still it was labor. Still it was effort. Then came steel. Then came steam. Then came electricity. In the early 1900s, the first electric washing machines arrived. They were bulky, experimental, often unsafe. But they were different. They used motion instead of muscle, agitation instead of arms. The laundry tub, once a place of stillness and struggle, became a place of swirling movement. Bit by bit, the design improved. Motors got stronger. Timers were added. Safety became standard. Metal drums replaced wood. Drainage became easier, and with every spin, something else happened. The past, soaked in labor, began to rinse itself clean. What was once a weekly burden began to feel manageable, predictable, less exhausting. The streamside scrub had met its match. And inside homes, in quiet corners of basements and laundry rooms, steel tubs began to carry the weight once held by human hands. Time, reclaimed in the story of invention. Few machines have given more than the washing machine, not just in cleanliness, but in hours before it. Laundry was a full day's task, often two. Wash day was marked on calendars. It meant preparation. Soap made from scratch. Water boiled on stoves. Clothes scrubbed, soaked, scrubbed again. Then came the rinse, the wringing, the hanging. But with the arrival of electric washers, time began to loosen. A load that once demanded hours now asked for minutes of setup, then left its owner free to move, to cook, to rest, to read, to breathe. It wasn't just labor that was eased. It was life. Children spent more time with mothers who no longer vanished behind clotheslines for hours. Evenings were no longer lost to soaking. Sundays could remain sacred. Weekdays could hold something beyond chores. In this quiet transfer, from hand to drum, from sweat to spin, people found room to grow, and that time added up. 1,000 minutes saved here, 100 hours freed there. Over weeks, months, years, it was a return of life itself. The washing machine didn't just wash clothes. It gave people their time back, one cycle at a time. Cycles of change. Laundry had long been a woman's task, unspoken, expected, unseen. A load of clothes carried from the bedroom to the sink rarely crossed minds beyond those who bore it. But when the machine arrived, the balance began to shift. What had once been muscle became buttons. What had once been hours became automation. And slowly, what had once been defined by gender began to open. With less effort required, more people shared the task. Husbands took on loads. Children learned early. The washing machine didn't erase roles, but it softened them. It made sharing possible, even easy, and outside the home, it opened doors. For many women, the hours once lost to laundry became hours spent learning, working, dreaming. It made space for ambition, for movement, for change. Society adjusted. Expectations began to blur. Homes became more balanced. The machine stood quietly in its corner, unassuming. But it was doing more than spinning cloth. It was spinning tradition. It was shifting routines that had held for centuries, and the change was not loud. It didn't make headlines. But it echoed in classrooms filled with women who now had time to study, in offices where they now had space to work, in homes where men now leaned over laundry baskets without shame. Progress comes in waves. Some are shouted, some are sung, and some arrive in the soft hum of a rinse cycle, spinning into the future. The washing machine does not shine. It does not boast. But in its quiet strength, it has reshaped the modern home. Today, its presence is expected, found in basements, closets, and tiny apartments. It comes in white, gray, stainless steel. It sits beside dryers, hums alongside dishwashers, waits behind closet doors. It is part of the heartbeat of home. Its cycles are familiar. Wash, rinse, spin. It sounds comforting. the slosh of water, the gentle bump of a shifting load, the final beep that signals a task complete. Technology has refined it. Digital displays, eco settings, steam cleaning. But the heart remains the same, a drum, spinning life cleaner, softer, fresher, and around it, life continues. A baby's first onesie, stained and cleaned again. A teenager's sports uniform, worn and renewed. A parent's shirt, pressed. For work. A grandparent's quilt gently revived. The washing machine stands quietly beside these moments, not the center, but the support. It reminds us that progress doesn't always roar. Sometimes it turns in gentle circles. Sometimes it gives back the simple things, time, dignity, rest, and as the world grows faster, louder, more complex, this humble machine remains steady. It holds the memory of the stream, the strength of the scrub, the promise of ease and width. Every load, it reminds us, even the smallest inventions can carry the weight of great change. Music in motion, the Walkman, in the late 1970s, something quietly revolutionary began to happen. People started walking with music, not just humming a tune in their heads or listening to the radio from afar, but truly carrying their own soundtrack through the world. The invention responsible was small enough to fit in a hand, yet powerful enough to reshape how we experience sound. The Sony Walkman. Before the Walkman, music was mostly a shared experience. It came from a speaker in a room, a stereo system in a car, or a stage in a concert hall. It gathered people around it. But the Walkman changed that. It brought music close, just inches from the ears, and in doing so, made it something deeply personal. For the first time in history, people could move freely while being wrapped in the comfort of their favorite songs. A teenager in Tokyo could take a train ride while listening to American rock. A jogger in New York could feel the beat of disco match their footsteps. A traveler could look out a bus window with a sad love song turning the scenery into a film. This wasn't just about sound. It was about emotion, privacy, and mood. The Walkman became a tiny vessel for a person's inner world. It gave people the ability to tune out noise, distraction, or even loneliness. Each tape slipped inside was a choice not only of music, but of feeling. It was a private symphony, invisible to others, yet powerful enough to change how people walked, thought, and lived. You could be in a crowd of hundreds, but feel like the main character in your own movie. And in a way, that's exactly what the Walkman allowed to soundtrack your life. One cassette at a time. The cassette's whisper at the heart of the Walkman was a little rectangle filled with tape, the compact cassette. On its own, it was simple. Just two tiny spools wrapped with magnetic tape, held inside a plastic shell. But it was magic in disguise. That thin ribbon could carry a symphony, a memory, a secret. Cassette tapes were more than a way to play music. They were messages, diaries, and souvenirs. You could record your favorite songs from the radio, then label the tape with colorful stickers. You could make a mixtape for someone you loved, each song a clue to your feelings. You could rewind and replay a single track over and over until it lived inside you. Because of their size, cassettes felt intimate. You could hold one in your palm and feel its weight, not just physical, but emotional. People often kept them in drawers or shoeboxes like keepsakes. They were small enough to be hidden, but meaningful enough to be missed if lost, unlike records. Or CDs, which were seen as fixed and formal. Cassettes felt flexible. You could pause them, record over them, fast forward to your favorite chorus. They followed your mood, your day, your heart. In bedrooms, kids recorded late-night radio shows. In cars, couples played love songs on long drives. In school lockers, Friends passed secret mixtapes. And in Walkmans everywhere, these little cassettes whispered personal truths only the listener could hear. They hissed gently with age, their sounds slightly imperfect. But that was part of the charm. The warmth of analog, the crackle of time. Each cassette was like a letter, written in sound. Wires and wonder connected to the Walkman were thin wires that led to soft padded headphones, a modest invention that carried something extraordinary. Through those wires, music found a direct path to the soul. Before then, headphones were bulky and used mostly in studios or radio stations. But the Walkman popularized a smaller kind, light and portable. They sat gently over the years, not inside them, allowing just enough sound to feel personal, without cutting off the world entirely. With these headphones on, a person could be present into places at once, physically on a bus, emotionally, in a concert. It was an invisible bubble, built not of walls but of music. One moment, you were walking through a noisy city street. The next, you were surrounded by violins or guitars, protected by melody. Headphones gave people a kind of armor, a way to hide, think, or just be. For students, they were a tool to escape stress. For workers, a break from the office buzz. For teenagers, a shield against the awkwardness of growing up, and there was wonder in those wires. A kind of joy that came from hearing a favorite song in full, uninterrupted focus. Music wasn't just background noise anymore, it was foreground, center stage, playing just for you. The softness of the foam, the quiet hum of the wire, the click of the play. But and all of it became part of a ritual, a gentle daily ceremony of connection. The world didn't go away. But with those headphones on, it changed shape, life with a soundtrack soon. The Walkman was everywhere, clipped to belts, tucked into backpacks, held in hand on early morning walks. It became more than a music player. It became a companion. People jogged through parks, the steady rhythm of their feet matching the beat in their ears. Travelers crossed countries with tapes playing songs from home. Students sat in libraries, head down in books, minds lifted by soft jazz or synth pop. The world moved, and music moved with it. And no longer did you have to sit still to enjoy music. The Walkman made it possible to dance through daily life, to feel alive during mundane routines, to find beauty in a commute or peace in a long walk. It also gave people a sense of identity. The tape you chose said something about you, your taste, your mood, your story. You could be quiet on the outside but loud with your music. You could be calm in person but wild in sound. The Walkman didn't just play music. It expressed you over time. Newer models arrived, slimmer, sleeker, more colorful. But the feeling stayed the same. Music as a friend, a mood, a mirror. The Walkman became a part of daily life, like a wristwatch or a favorite jacket. Familiar, reliable, personal. Even as digital devices arrived, the memory of the Walkman lingered. It had taught the world how to listen while moving, how to dream while walking. It taught people how to live with a soundtrack, and in the quiet hum of a tape rewinding, or the soft click of a headphone plug, there was always something deeper. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful revolutions don't shout. They whisper. A world in your palm, the mobile phone. It began with a single call, loud, static-filled, and strange. On a street in New York City in 1973, a man lifted a device the size of a brick to his ear and spoke into the future. That call, made on the first true mobile phone, echoed far beyond the moment. It was the start of something that would shrink the world. The earliest mobile phones weren't sleek or convenient. They were heavy, with thick antennas and short battery lives. They lived in cars, briefcases, or bulky shoulder bags. They didn't fit in your pocket, but they held something powerful, freedom from the cord. A person could speak while walking, driving, even while standing under the open sky. It was a shift in how people thought about space and time. Before this, telephones had fixed places on walls, desks, or tables. You had to go to them. But mobile phones reversed that rule. They came to you. You carried your voice, your contact with others, wherever you went. At first, they were rare. Only a few could afford them: business people, celebrities, or early adopters. But even then, the feeling was clear. Something big had changed. The voice, once tied to a place, was now free. A conversation could happen from a moving car, a park bench, or the middle of a quiet road. It felt like magic. The mobile phone was not just a new machine. It was a new idea. An idea that sound could travel with us. That the world, once so large and distant, could suddenly feel closer, one ring at a time. Text, call, connect. As the years passed, phones got smaller, lighter, quieter. They no longer needed antennas like fishing poles or batteries the size of bricks. They began to slip into jacket pockets and handbags. And they began to do more than call. One of the quietest changes was the arrival of the text message. It seemed small at first, just a short note sent from one phone to another. But it was personal. It let people speak without speaking. A message could be sent in a classroom, during a meeting, or from 1,000 miles away. It allowed silence and words to live together. Texting changed how we connected. It made conversations slower, but also more thoughtful. You could reread a message, save it, hold it in your hand. A short sentence, "I miss you," or "be safe," could carry deep feeling. Some texts arrived in the middle of the night, lighting up the screen like a small star. Others came at just the right time, offering comfort or joy. In moments of sadness, they became lifelines. In moments of love, they became keepsakes, and calls evolved too. They became clearer, longer, more casual. People stopped asking, "Is this a good time?" and just started talking. Parents checked on children. Friends laughed together from different cities. Couples said goodnight from across oceans. The phone became more than a device. It became a thread, a way to hold on to others even when they weren't nearby. Over time, we didn't just use phones. We depended on them. They became part of our memories, part of our daily rhythm. Each message, each ring, a reminder that someone, somewhere, was reaching out. The never-off switch. As phones grew smarter, something else changed. They stopped sleeping. Always on, always ready. They lit up in the dark, buzzed in our pockets, and blinked from beside our pillows. The world had entered a new kind of wakefulness. Being reachable became a new kind of normal. Messages arrived at any hour. Emails chimed during dinner. Notifications pulled attention from conversations, thoughts, even sleep. It wasn't loud. It was quiet. But it was constant. At first, it felt exciting. The idea of being connected all the time, of never missing a moment. But soon it became heavier. A weight in the pocket. A sense that you had to answer, had to reply, had to be there. Even when your body was somewhere else, people began to feel pulled between the present and the digital, between rest and alertness. Even silence began to carry tension. Was something waiting? Was a message missed? The phone became not just a tool of connection, but also a quiet demand. This new, always-on world crept into every part of life. It changed how people worked, how they relaxed, how they talked. Dinner tables glowed with screens. Meetings buzzed with alerts. Even vacations were filled with pings and replies. There was no off switch. And with that, the boundary between self and screen began to blur. The phone, once an accessory, became an extension of thought, of feeling, of attention, and yet, in all this noise, something gentle still remained. A voice on the other end. A message at the right time. A picture. Sent with care. Even in the overload, real connection could still find its way through pocket-sized revolution. The mobile phone had come a long way from the heavy bricks of the 1970s. By the 2000s, it had become something familiar. Thin, smooth, glowing a rectangle of glass that carried more than just numbers. It carried lives. Phones were no longer just phones. They were calendars, cameras, maps, music players. They were windows to the world. With a single tap, you could see a friend's face, read the news, buy a book, or share a laugh. You could work, learn, dream all from the palm of your hand. They became part of how people woke up, how they walked through cities, how they remembered birthdays or navigated new places. They became quiet companions on trains, in waiting rooms, on rooftops. For many, they were the last thing seen at night, and the first thing touched in the morning. This wasn't just a change in tools. It was a change in life. Phones shaped how we think, how we feel, how we relate. Relationships grew over calls, deepened through texts, and stayed alive through photos and updates. Entire friendships lived inside a glowing screen, and as the world changed, so did the phone's role. In moments of crisis, they became safety nets. In moments of celebration, they became cameras. In long-distance love, they became bridges. They carried laughter, grief, hope. They became, in every sense, a reflection of us, our needs, our habits, our hearts. What was once a luxury became a necessity. What was once rare became routine, and through it all, the phone quietly stayed. With us. Through journeys, through growing up, through quiet mornings and loud nights. Always near, always ready. A world in your palm. From click to cloud, the laptop and tablet, there was a time when work belonged to the desk. A place where ideas stayed within four walls, and productivity meant sitting still. The hum of desktop computers, the tapping of keyboards, and the flicker of fluorescent lights defined the rhythm of the modern workday. But then, slowly and steadily, the laptop arrived, and with it came freedom. The earliest laptops were not light. They were thick, boxy, and often needed more charging than they gave in return. But even in their clunky beginnings, there was something new, movement. You could carry your work with you. Take your thoughts to a park bench. Review documents on a train. Write code, build from places that once had nothing to do with work. As technology evolved, so did the design. Laptops became thinner, quieter, more elegant. Their fans whispered instead of roared. Their keys moved with ease, and their screens lit up with a soft glow, inviting work to happen anywhere, not just in offices, but in kitchens, coffee shops, libraries, and backyards. This change was more than physical. It was emotional. To work with a laptop was to feel untethered, light, flexible. Deadlines could still exist, but they traveled. They moved with the worker. No longer did creativity wait for a chair and a desk. It could spark at an airport gate. It could bloom late at night under soft lamplight. People no longer asked where the office was. They asked where the Wi-Fi was. And even then, sometimes it didn't matter. Offline or online, the laptop allowed thought to roam. It became more than a tool. It became a companion to the modern thinker, mobile, reliable, and free a touch. Of innovation then came the tablet, a screen without a keyboard, a device that didn't open and close, but stayed whole like a digital notebook, light as air. It was a new idea, simple yet surprising, to use your hands, not just your fingers, to explore the digital world. At first, people weren't sure. Could tapping a screen replace typing? Could swiping replace scrolling? But it didn't take long to feel the change. Touch was natural, familiar. Children reached out without hesitation. Adults adjusted in quiet delight. The digital world, once behind plastic and buttons, now felt close as if it were part of the skin. The tablet offered something that sat between the phone and the laptop. It wasn't meant to replace either. It was its own kind of freedom. One focused more on ease than depth. Watching videos, sketching, reading books in bed, taking notes in a classroom with a simple pen swipe. It brought back the feeling of writing on paper. Only now, the paper could store libraries artists drew with digital brushes, their fingers becoming tools of color and shape. Musicians tapped notes into virtual pianos. Chefs swiped through recipes while stirring pots. Doctors carried tablets through hospitals. Teachers used them in lessons. It wasn't just a screen. It was a helper, a holder of ideas, a silent partner in daily life, and with cloud storage, the quiet magic of saving. Without saving, the tablet, like the laptop, no longer needed a place to stay. It traveled too. It moved with purpose, ease, and quiet confidence, inviting people to think, create, and connect with the softest touch. Knowledge, on-demand laptops and tablets didn't just change where we worked. They changed how we learned, explored, and expressed. The world's information, once locked behind bookshelves or classrooms, was now a few clicks or taps away. Students used them to study late into the night, flipping between lessons and research with just a stroke of the touchpad. They no longer had to carry heavy backpacks filled with textbooks. Their devices became the library, the lab, the notebook, the whiteboard, and their curiosity was no longer limited by what was nearby. It was only shaped by what they searched. Travelers relied on laptops and tablets for maps, translations, bookings, and stories. They journaled their trips on glowing screens from hotel balconies or tucked into train compartments, sharing moments across time zones with ease. Artists opened apps like blank canvases, drawing with fingers instead of pencils. Writers typed in silence, their screens keeping rhythm with their thoughts. Apps became the new tools, some for learning languages, others for solving equations. Some apps whispered meditation, while others lit up constellations. There was something for everyone, from the dreamer to the doer. And all of it lived inside these slim rectangles, even in places where access to books was rare or schools were far. These devices made knowledge possible. Videos taught math. Articles explained history. Simulations brought science to life. A child in a village could sit under a tree and learn about galaxies. A teenager on a long bus ride could understand philosophy, all through the soft light of a screen. And because they stored everything, notes, memories, sketches, they became like modern journals. A place where people could return, review, reflect. They were not just windows to the world. They were mirrors, too, showing people who they were becoming. Digital comfort zones. As the world became more connected, more digital, more fast, there was also a gentle shift. A return to stillness, even if through a screen. People found calm in the glow of their laptops and tablets, not just through work or learning, but through being, through quiet moments of scrolling, reading, watching. The screen, once seen as a distraction, became something softer, a refuge. For many, it was where they met friends, shared photos, laughed at videos, or followed stories. It was a place where the day could slow down, where time stretched gently. Laptops became the light in the corner of the room at night, playing soft music or showing a favorite film. Tablets became bedtime storytellers, reading with soft voices and fading lights. For some, these devices were how they talked to family across oceans. For others, they were how they created songs, slideshows, poems, and inside those quiet zones, people built digital nests, bookmarked pages, favorite apps, folders of memories. Their devices didn't just store data. They held mood, routine, and ritual. The soft click of opening a laptop, the way fingers moved over keys, the gentle slide to unlock a screen. It all became part of daily life. These comfort zones weren't loud or flashy. They were quiet and warm. A screen by candlelight, a tablet under a blanket, a laptop open beside a cup of tea. The outside world might rush and roar, but inside the screen, things could slow down, and in that stillness, laptops and tablets became something more than tools. They became spaces. Safe, personal, familiar. Places to think, places to feel, places to just be. The invisible threads Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, it happened without fanfare. One moment, cables wound around desks and tangled under tables. The next, they began to disappear. Quietly, softly. The world was being untied. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth arrived. Like a whisper, not with a roar, but with the simple promise of freedom. No more cords to carry, no more plugging and unplugging. These technologies removed the physical links between us and our machines. But they also did something more profound. They made the digital world feel weightless. Wi-Fi came first into homes, and slowly into public spaces, spreading like invisible wind. It moved through walls, across parks, and between skyscrapers. You couldn't see it or touch it, but it was there. Reliable, quiet, constant. It let people move while staying connected. It allowed kitchens to become workspaces and beds to become movie theaters. Bluetooth followed with its own kind of magic, short range, personal and elegant. It wasn't about distance. It was about closeness. It connected your headphones without a wire. It played music in your car from your phone. It sent photos from one device to another in silence. Together, these two technologies reshaped how we lived. They gave us space not just on our desks, but in our minds. Without the need to connect physically, we started to think more freely. Movement and information no longer had to fight each other. They flowed side by side, and all of it happened without drawing much attention. The cords simply faded. And in their place, the air itself became a path, the pulse of the present step into any modern cafe, airport, or waiting room. And you'll notice something subtle, heads bowed not in prayer, but in presence. Eyes on screens. Fingers tapping. People around each other, yet drifting through their own private spaces. This is the quiet ritual of the wireless world. Wi-Fi became the heartbeat of modern places. We no longer ask just for a seat or a drink. We ask for the password. That little code typed in with care was a kind of key. It opened the door to work, entertainment, updates, or simply escape. It was how people stayed close to home while far away, how they filled small moments with meaning. In airports, it was a way to send a final message before boarding. In cafes, a way to work surrounded by the hum of life. In libraries, it offered access to worlds beyond the shelves. And at home, It turned every room into a portal to school, to work, to friends, to memories this connection didn't make people less social. It simply gave them more ways to connect in silence, in stillness, across great distances. Friends could watch a show together from different cities. Families could talk face to face even when separated by time zones. A traveler could read a bedtime story to their child from a hotel room halfway across the world. The signal became a kind of lifeline. When it dropped, people felt its absence like a flicker in the rhythm of the day. When it returned, there was a kind of peace. A soft return to the hum of the now. Wireless technology didn't just change our tools. It changed our patterns, our pauses, our presence. It shaped the way we lived, without ever asking for attention. Silent signals, strong TI's Bluetooth, with its gentle name and quiet role, brought a different kind of closeness. It was the invisible thread that held personal moments together. Softly, smoothly, without intrusion, the technology didn't shout. It didn't shine or buzz for attention. Instead, it linked devices quietly, almost tenderly. A pair of earbuds paired with a phone. A smartwatch synced with steps. A speaker played a memory. A photo is shared, not through email or cloud, but through the air itself, a quick beam from one device to another. In cars, Bluetooth meant hands stayed on the wheel while voices moved freely. In homes, it meant music followed from room to room, uninterrupted. In workouts, it meant freedom, no wires bouncing, no cords snagging. Just rhythm, movement, breath, and song. But beyond function, there was something personal about it. Bluetooth was how we set a mood. A playlist in the kitchen while cooking. A quiet audiobook before sleep. It was part of the small daily rituals, moments where technology stepped back, letting people feel more, not less. It allowed connection without conversation, presence without words. A quiet harmony between machine and human, so smooth it often went unnoticed, until it didn't work, until a connection failed. Then the silence felt different. A reminder of how much these silent signals mattered, and when it worked as it usually did, it felt like magic. Tap, pair, done. Music, memory, motion all in flow. The quiet web we weave, we don't see it. We don't hear it. But around us, always, a network hums. It is made not of threads or wires, but of signals and trust. It is what lets our photos back up, our emails arrive, our devices update in the night. It is what lets us work in one place and be seen in another. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth form the quiet web. We weave a mesh of invisible paths that carry the pieces of our lives. Messages, maps, music, memories. They pass through walls and clouds, reaching across space without sound. And we, the users, move through them without thinking. This invisibility is its strength. We forget it's there until the signal weakens, until the icon blinks. Then we notice how much we depend on it, how much of our lives now rests on what cannot be touched. The quiet web is not loud. It does not ask for thanks. It simply waits, ready to carry what we send, ready to hold what we need. It is there when we laugh, when we cry, when we share news, good or bad. It is there in the background of study sessions, work calls, voice messages from a friend we miss. Without it, our photos wouldn't reach their albums. Our calls wouldn't find ears. Our songs wouldn't play. But with it, seamlessly, silently, life flows, and so we walk through this web, unaware but surrounded. A gentle net, not to trap, but to lift. A world where connection is not seen but felt. Where the space between us is smaller than it's ever been, thanks to signals that never sleep. In the end, These invisible threads have become part of our fabric. Not loud, not sharp, just soft, steady, and strong. They hold together our days, our plans, our hearts without a single string in sight. Memory in pixels, the digital camera and printer. There was a time when every photo came with a weight. A roll of film had to be finished, then dropped off, developed, and picked up again. Each picture carried mystery. Would it be clear? Blurry? Just right? The joy of seeing photos was delayed, sometimes by days. But when digital cameras arrived, that pause disappeared. Suddenly, a photo was no longer a promise. It was immediate, instant. You pressed the button, and there it was. The moment, frozen in pixels, glowing on a screen. There was no need for film, no waiting. Just click and see. At first, digital cameras were simple tiny screens, small memory cards, basic buttons. But they opened something big. They gave people power. The power to try again. To take 10 shots of the same smile. To capture movement, mood, and color without worry. The shift wasn't just technical, it was emotional. With film, every shot had weight. With digital, every shot had freedom. People became bolder with their photos. They played with light, with angles, with ideas. They caught laughter, quiet moments, odd faces, real life. Travelers captured sunsets. That changed by the minute. Parents took hundreds of baby photos. Friends turned everyday moments into tiny treasures. And the camera itself changed shape from bulky devices to slim compacts, and eventually into our phones. But it all started here with the move from film to flash. From waiting to now. From hoping to knowing. It made the act of remembering easier, closer, and somehow more alive. The joy of printing even in a digital age. Some photos ask to be held. Not just seen on a screen, but printed, touched, framed, given. That's where printers found their place, not as tools of the office, but as makers of memory. Before digital printers, getting a photo printed meant going to a shop, waiting days, and hoping for the best. But now, people could choose their favorite shot and have it in their hands minutes later. A moment captured, then turned into something real. Photos became more than pictures. They became gifts, a snapshot slipped into a card, a surprise waiting. In an envelope, they became decor arranged on walls, strung on wires, framed above desks. They became markers of time, birthdays, weddings, holidays, quiet afternoons. Printing gave photos weight again. Not in cost or worry, but in presence. A printed photo doesn't scroll away. It stays. It can sit beside a bed, travel in a wallet, or stick to a refrigerator door. It becomes part of the space around us, and the act of printing became a kind of ritual. Choosing the right photo, adjusting the crop, watching the image slowly appear. On paper, it felt old-fashioned, but in a comforting way, like writing a letter instead of sending a text. A slower kind of love, for some. It was about albums, pages turned slowly, stories told in silence. For others, it was about keepsakes, a reminder of who we are, where we've been, who we've loved. And for many, it was about sharing. Giving someone a piece of a memory, printed with care, capture, click, share. Then came the next step, not just capturing or printing, but sharing. The moment you took a photo, it could be sent across the world. In seconds, an image could move. From a quiet room to hundreds of screens. A birthday, a smile, a sunset shared with friends, family, or strangers. Digital cameras and phones turned memories into motion, into updates, into tiny stories told in squares. One click, one tap, and a memory became public, social media grew from this power. Platforms that once were about text became visual playgrounds. People shared where they were, what they saw, how they felt, all through images. And the camera was always ready, tucked in a pocket, open in a second, always watching. Photography wasn't only for professionals anymore. Everyone became a photographer. Everyone had a lens, a point of view, a frame. Photos no longer needed to be perfect. They just needed to be real. Some were carefully edited, colors tuned, filters added. Others were raw and untouched. A quick snap of morning light, a pet caught mid-yawn, a meal plated with care. The beauty wasn't always in the photo itself, but in the moment it came from. This wave of sharing changed how we saw the world. We began to notice details. We looked for stories in ordinary things. A door, a cloud, a coffee cup. The camera made us pause to see, to frame, to feel, and though many images lived only briefly, scrolled past, double-tapped, forgotten they carried something. A trace of someone's day, a flicker of someone's life. Memory, now in motion, frozen in emotion. Some photos last, not because they're famous or perfect, but because they hold something true. A feeling, a glance, a time that mattered. They live in frames on mantels, in wallets faded from years of being carried, on the walls of homes, and albums that smell like dust and ink. These are the photos people return to, not to admire, but to remember. A black and white wedding picture, a baby's first steps, a group of friends, arms wrapped around each other, a grandparent smiling from a porch. These are the quiet keepers of emotion, the frozen echoes of love, loss, laughter. Some photos capture history, a city skyline before it changed, a street no longer there, a holiday long past. Others capture silence, the empty chair, the old backyard, the final hug. And when we look at them, something stirs. We are taken back. There is something in the stillness of a photo that feels louder than sound. It holds time without moving. It holds love without speaking. It is proof that something happened, that we were there, that it mattered. And as much as we live in a world of constant clicking and sharing, these quiet photos remind us of something deeper. That memory isn't just about information. It's about emotion, about presence. The digital camera and printer gave us new ways to keep these moments. Not just faster or clearer, but more often, more closely, more personally. They made it easy to hold on. And through them, we learned not just how to take pictures, but how to notice life. Skybound eyes, the drone. Once to fly was a dream, left two birds and pilots, something distant, mechanical, or born from nature. But then came the drone. Small, light, and steady. It placed wings in the hands of ordinary people. No cockpit, no license, no feathers. Just four spinning blades and a quiet hum that lifted cameras into the sky. The earliest drones were curious machines, hobbyist tools, used more for fun than function. But they held promise. In parks and backyards, they zipped and hovered. At first, their flights were short, jerky, bound by signal range and battery life. Still, they revealed a possibility. That the sky was no longer unreachable. To guide a drone was to feel connected to air in a new way. It didn't require strength or speed. It needed attention, patience, and care. With a handheld controller, users watched their device rise above trees, rooftops, and fields. What once required a helicopter now took the push of a thumb, and with this rise, flight became familiar. Not just for scientists or soldiers, but for artists, children, farmers, storytellers. A new chapter of flight had begun, one not driven by power but by perspective. Flight became personal, gentle, even poetic. In a world so often bound by ground, the drone brought a feeling of lightness, a reminder that looking down can be just as magical as looking up, new perspectives from. The moment drones began carrying cameras, the world was seen anew. Hills rolled like waves. Cities looked like circuits. The sky met the earth at quiet edges no one had noticed before. The ordinary became beautiful just by changing the angle. Photographers and filmmakers were the first to embrace this new view. A wedding no longer needed only ground shots. It could be seen from above, with guests forming silent circles around love. A surfer's path through the sea could now be traced from the air, each wave a line in the water. A forest, once dark and closed, opened wide, showing hidden paths, clearings, patterns. This aerial view wasn't just for beauty. It offered insight. Roofs, fields, traffic all became easier to understand from above. It became possible to study a town's shape, a coastline's curve, a crowd's movement. News coverage, once limited to ground reports, now showed full scenes. Disasters could be mapped. Roads could be cleared. Lives could be saved, and for individuals, flying a drone became a quiet hobby with a vast reach. It was not about speed or tricks. It was about watching the world open up, about seeing your neighborhood like a map, about filming sunsets from the sky. This wasn't just a new tool. It was a new eye, one that helped people look differently at what had always been there and to remember how much beauty hides in the ordinary. Until seen from above, tools of tomorrow, though small and light, drones carried more than cameras. They carried possibility. And slowly, almost quietly, they began to change how work was done, not with noise, but with gentle precision. In farming, drones flew above fields to check crops. They scanned for dryness, for pests, for patterns. What once took days on foot could now take minutes in the air. Some drones even dropped seeds, sprayed water, or released nutrients, tending to plants with the care of a gardener and the reach of a bird. In rescue missions, drones reached where humans could not, into forests, flood zones, or collapsed buildings. With thermal sensors and live feeds, they searched for movement, for heat, for life. They moved through danger, helping people from above without putting more at risk. In construction and inspection, they became silent helpers, scanning bridges, roofs, and towers, showing cracks where weakness. Workers stayed safe and projects moved forward. Faster, smarter, quieter. In science and research, drones followed animals in their natural space. They mapped glaciers. They measured volcanoes. They hovered above coral reefs. No engine roar, no heavy footstep, just quiet flight and careful watching. Even in everyday business, drones played a part, delivering packages, recording real estate videos, surveying land. Each task done with precision, without distraction, without delay. They weren't here to replace people. They were here to assist, to extend reach, reduce risk, and offer a better view. They became the tools of tomorrow by solving the problems of today. Poetry in flight, but beyond function, beyond industry, drones also offered something softer, the gift of beauty, of grace, of storytelling from the air. To fly a drone over a mountain at dawn is to witness a secret most eyes never see: light moving across peaks, shadows shifting gently in valleys. To hover above a lake at dusk is to find stillness, a mirror of water, untouched, unbothered. At weddings, drones floated above dancers, catching laughter and joy, from above silent observers of love and celebration. At music festivals, they soared with lights and rhythm, turning gatherings into galaxies. In cities, they moved between towers like birds made of metal and memory. Poets once wrote from the ground, inspired by what they saw around them. Now, some write with drones painting in pixels, composing with movement. A camera glide becomes a sentence, a slow orbit, a whisper for artists. Drones became brushes. For storytellers, pens. A single shot drifting from cliff to cloud could say what words never could. A feeling of distance, of closeness, of wonder, and even those who never flew one still felt the magic. On screens, they watched drone videos that brought tears, silence, joy. A single video could take someone home or to a place they'd never seen. It wasn't just about the footage. It was about the feeling. Drones at their core are machines. But in the right hands, they become more. They become the sky's pen in every quiet flight, a poem in motion. Time on the wrist, the smartwatch. There was once a time when a wristwatch told only one story the time of day. The movement of hands around a face, ticking softly in rhythm with the world. But as technology evolved and needs changed, the simple watch became something more, a silent companion that tracked our lives. The smartwatch didn't arrive with a bang. It came quietly, first as a curiosity. A screen where a dial used to be. A device that could do more than mark minutes. At first, it showed time digitally. Then it buzzed when a message arrived. Then it counted steps, tracked sleep, and monitored heartbeats. Before long, watches were no longer just tools of punctuality. They became mirrors of our health, windows into our days. They measured the way we moved, how well we rested, how fast our hearts beat during a run or slowed during rest. They helped us understand our bodies not with numbers alone, but with gentle patterns. Messages no longer waited for a phone. A wrist buzzed with news, reminders, or the quiet ping of a loved one's words. A person could walk, drive, or sit in silence and still feel connected with a glance, not a scroll. The wristwatch had grown up. No longer a symbol of business or elegance alone. It had become something softer, more personal. It still told time. But now it also told stories of health, of rhythm, of life as it happened, second by second. Wrist-wrapped wellness. One of the most tender gifts of the smartwatch was how it quietly cared. Not in grand gestures, but in small nudges. A reminder to stand, a breath to take, a goal to reach. It didn't shout. It whispered. People began to notice their own rhythms when they moved most, when they needed rest, when their hearts raced. The smartwatch became like a gentle coach, present, consistent, and encouraging. A step goal wasn't just about numbers. It was a reason to walk a little more, to stretch, to go outside. Sleep tracking showed more than hours spent in bed. It revealed patterns: deep sleep, restless nights, quiet dreams. For some, it offered peace. For others, a chance to improve. All of it done silently, without judgment. The watch buzzed softly when a text arrived. It tapped gently when it was time to breathe. Some days, those small touches became anchors, ways to come back to the body, to the moment, and as features expanded, so did the ways the smartwatch helped. It could warn of heart irregularities. It could call for help after a fall. It could guide someone through meditation with soft pulses. All from the wrist. Always close. This was wellness redefined, not in pills or machines, but in quiet reminders and caring prompts. A modern kind of care, made possible by the smallest screen and the lightest touch. Digital jewels. The smartwatch didn't only change how people lived, it changed how they looked. Watches had always been fashion. A gold. Band, a leather strap, a face that gleamed under the sun. But now, technology joined the tradition. Screens and sensors wrapped in elegance. At first, smartwatches looked simple, square, functional. But soon, designs bloomed. Round faces mimicked classic timepieces. Bands came in metal, rubber, fabric, and leather. Colors changed with the seasons. Faces could be customized one day minimal, the next filled with stars. People could match their watches to their mood, their outfit, their activity. A run in the morning with a sporty strap. A dinner at night with a sleek band. A sleepy Sunday with calming colors. It wasn't just wearable tech, it became personal expression. Jewelry had always carried meaning of taste, of identity, of status. Smartwatches did too, but with motion, with purpose. A bracelet could shine, but a smartwatch could shine. And track a heartbeat, and play a song, and map a walk. This blend of style and function was more than fashion. It was a shift. Technology was no longer hidden in bags or pockets. It lived on the wrist, seen, chosen, worn. It became part of the body's language, digital jewels, glowing gently, ticking silently, telling not just time, but everything. Else too, moments at a glance. The most remarkable feature of the smartwatch might be its simplicity. Not in what it does, but in how it does it. With just a glance, it reveals the pulse of life. You lift your wrist, and there it is, the time, of course, but also a reminder, a message, a step count, the weather, your heart rate, a gentle nudge to breathe, a notification from far away, all waiting quietly. No noise, no scroll, no distraction. The world is busy. Phones blink, computers hum, schedules fill. But the smartwatch simplifies. It offers a glimpse, not a flood. It says, here's what matters right now. For runners, it shows pace. For workers, it gives focus. For parents, it pings with updates. For dreamers, it ticks through moon phases. For everyone, it holds the rhythm of daily life without pulling us away from it. This glance, quick, quiet, complete, has become part of how people live. It helps them stay on track, but also to return to presence, to be where they are, while still knowing what's next. And as features grow, maps, timers, reminders, timers for brushing teeth or brewing tea, the watch keeps offering not just information, but clarity. A gentle partner, one glance away, always ready. In the end, the smartwatch is not only about technology, it's about time, not just telling it, but making it feel better. Time that moves with care, with rhythm, with peace, a moment, a glance. That's all it takes. The quiet revolution, the electric car, for over a century. The sound of driving was the sound of engines, the deep rumble at startup, the rising growl on highways, the soft hum at idle. It was familiar, almost comforting. But then something began to change. The electric car entered the scene not with noise, but with silence. No shifting gears, no exhaust puffing into the air, just a quiet press of the pedal and smooth, steady motion. It didn't roar to life, it simply glided forward. This stillness was more than mechanical. It marked a shift in the spirit of travel. Roads once filled with mechanical grunts began to echo with calm. The world outside the car felt closer. Birdsong, wind, the subtle crackle of tires on pavement. It was not emptiness. It was clarity. People driving electric cars noticed at first the way the vehicle moved without effort, the way it paused without vibration, the way cities sounded softer from the inside. It wasn't just a change in technology. It was a change in experience. The silence didn't make the car feel weaker. It made it feel wiser. As if speed no longer needed to shout. As if power could be gentle from crowded streets to open highways. This new kind of movement began to spread. Slowly at first, then steadily. One car, then another. Each one turning heads not with noise, but with calm. The revolution had begun. And it started with quiet, powered by thought. Electric cars didn't just run differently, they looked and felt different too. Every curve, every surface, seemed to whisper a future-minded message. Clean, sleek, intentional, without a need for large engines or traditional parts. Designers were free to reimagine the shape of a car. Hoods became lower. Cabins became more spacious. Dashboards turned into smooth screens. Buttons disappeared. Controls were simplified. Everything felt lighter, not just in weight, but in mood. Materials changed too. More sustainable. More mindful. Fabrics made from recycled bottles. Interiors designed to reduce waste. Lights that adjusted softly to the environment. Even the tires were crafted with care for the road and the earth. Driving an electric car felt different, not just because of the engine, but because of its values. These weren't vehicles built only for speed. They were built with purpose. 2. Move forward in more ways than one. There was a quiet intelligence in every detail. Some cars had autopilot features gently guiding the ride. Others parked themselves. Many updated their systems wirelessly, improving without a mechanic's touch. This wasn't just about movement. It was about evolution, and behind it all was a sense of care for design, for nature, for future generations. The electric car wasn't just a new kind of machine. It was a reflection of new priorities: sustainability, simplicity, and thoughtful progress. Charging the future. A century of cars had built a world around gas stations, bright lights, buzzing pumps, the scent of fuel in the air. Refueling meant noise, haste, and habit. But electric cars required something new. Something quieter. Charging. It took time for the idea to settle. People were used to quick stops, to tanks that filled in minutes. But charging invited a different rhythm, slower, steadier. A pause, not a pit stop. At first, chargers were few, tucked in corners of parking lots, behind grocery stores, near office buildings. But slowly, a network began to grow. Stations appeared along highways, in neighborhoods, at cafes. Some were fast, some slower. Some powered by the sun, some shaped like trees. Charging habits began to form. People plugged in at night like they did with their phones, or while shopping, or during lunch. The car became part of the day's natural flow, not a task, but a companion in rest. For some, the act of charging became a ritual, a moment of pause in a busy life. A quiet reminder of energy, not from burning, but from light and wind and water. A connection not to oil, but to the elements. And as battery ranges grew, so did confidence. A full charge now meant hundreds of miles. Travel opened up. Road trips returned. The fear of running low faded, replaced by maps of growing green dots, places to pause, recharge, move on. In this new landscape, gas stations didn't disappear. But next to them, something new took root: quiet, clean, and filled with possibility. Driving toward tomorrow more than machines, electric cars became symbols, not of wealth or speed, but of transition from one way of life to another. Each electric car on the road wasn't just a vehicle. It was a statement that the future could be cleaner, that progress could be kind. That motion didn't have to mean pollution. For cities, they offered hope: cleaner air, quieter streets. For families, they promised savings, safety, simplicity. For the planet, They reduced the weight of carbon and soot, but beyond data and savings, electric cars brought feeling, a sense of doing something right, a sense of joining something bigger. Each drive was still personal, to work, to home, to somewhere new. But it also became part of a shared journey, and innovation didn't stop. New models emerged faster, lighter, more efficient. Solar-powered roofs, regenerative braking, cars that talked to the grid or to each other. Some dreamed of self-driving fleets. Others focused on beauty, on joy, on making every ride feel like a breath of fresh air. Still, the core remained the same. A commitment to move without harm. To go forward without forgetting what we leave behind. Driving toward tomorrow doesn't mean rushing. It means choosing carefully. And in the hum of an electric car, soft, steady, and sure that choice becomes clear, the road ahead is open. And the revolution rolls on quietly. The soft echo why invention endures. Inventions are often described in parts, gears, circuits, wires, code. But beneath the surface, they carry something deeper. They are not just machines. They are mirrors, reflections of our hopes, our struggles, and our quiet desires to make life gentler, kinder, more possible. A device may look like plastic and glass, but inside, it holds needy desire to connect, to see, to move, to heal. A computer isn't just a tool. It's a response to complexity. A lamp isn't just for light. It answers our fear of the dark. The simplest invention is born not of steel, but of empathy. Throughout history, people have turned to invention, not only for survival, but for softness, to comfort a baby, to soothe a wound, to warm a home. Behind every blueprint is a human story. Behind every patent, a person thinking, there must be a better way. Some inventions change how we live, others how we feel. A wheelchair does both. So does a hearing aid, or a voice assistant that reads out the news to someone who can no longer see. These creations don't just fix problems. They understand people, and that is why invention endures. Because it's more than clever. It's compassionate. Because even in a world of machines, what we're really building is belonging. From mind to moment, every invention begins the same way, not as a thing, but as a thought. A flicker of frustration. A spark of curiosity. A quiet what if in someone's mind. In a small room, someone sketched a rough outline. In a garage, someone soldered wires late into the night. In a cafe, on a napkin, a person mapped an idea that no one had yet seen. These beginnings are small, fragile, but they are powerful. The process is slow. An idea grows. It stumbles, shifts, starts over. It becomes a model, then a prototype, then perhaps a machine. But that machine, once invisible, now lives in our homes, on our wrists, in our pockets. It wakes us, guides us, teaches us, entertains us. The microwave began as a mistake in a lab. The bicycle was once mocked. The typewriter, once seen as cold, became a voice for many. Even now, someone is testing a tool that will, one day, feel as normal to us as flipping a switch. What starts in a mind private, unsure, becomes part of daily life. We forget how new things once were. How strange. We forget that every normal thing was once impossible. Invention is the bridge between thought and moment, between the silence of an idea and the sound of a world changed by it. The whisper of progress. When we think of invention, we imagine big events, flashes of genius, headlines, applause. But in truth, progress often arrives like a whisper, soft, steady, almost unnoticed. Most of the tools that shape our lives didn't begin with celebration. The internet, at first, was quiet code. The camera, once bulky and strange, slowly crept into everyday life. Eyeglasses were once rare. Now they rest on millions of noses without a second thought. This is the magic of invention, its ability to fade into the background, to become so useful, so woven into our lives that we stop seeing it. A zipper, a pen, a window that closes without slamming. Each is a quiet revolution. Even major shifts come gently. Electric lights replaced candles slowly. Refrigerators took years to replace iceboxes. Smartphones didn't shout their way in. They slipped into pockets and stayed. Progress doesn't always roar. Often, it hums. It adjusts the margins. It clears the clutter. It makes something easier and then better. It asks, "How can I help?" And then it answers like this. This is why invention is not just the story of breakthroughs. It's the story of refinements, of everyday miracles, of gentle help. Over and over again, dreaming forward while we sleep. Somewhere, someone is dreaming. At a desk lit by a single lamp. In a lab filled with quiet machines. On a long walk, lost in thought. They are imagining the future, one that has not yet arrived, but already feels close. Some imagine new ways to power our homes. Others dream of cleaner water, faster learning, safer cities. Some think of hands that help those who cannot move, or screens that bend, or buildings that breathe. These inventors may not know what their ideas will become. They may fail many times, but they keep dreaming, because the future does not stop, and neither does the need to make it better. The tools we have now, the ones we rely on each day, are the results of someone else's past dream. And someday, the things we can only imagine today will become the background of someone else's life. Maybe they'll wear shoes that charge phones, or sleep under roofs that store sunlight. Maybe they'll never lose anything again, because everything will be findable. Maybe they'll talk to someone who isn't there, and it won't feel strange. Invention endures because the dreaming never ends. Each generation hands the tools forward, and along with them, the hope that things can be improved, and so we rest. And while we do, someone, somewhere, is still building tomorrow. Carefully, lovingly, quietly.